The Valari had lived on the moon called HFY for thousands of years. They were small creatures with soft blue skin and large dark eyes that reflected the light of their three suns. They had no claws, no fangs, and no weapons. They had never needed such things. Their world was peaceful, and they spent their days growing beautiful gardens that glowed in the night. The Valari believed that all life was connected. They sang songs to their plants, and the plants seemed to grow stronger because of it. They built no walls around their cities because they had no enemies. Children played in open fields without fear. Elders taught the young ones about art, music, and the beauty of the universe. War was a word they knew only from ancient stories about other species far away. Their leader was an old Valari named HFY. He had lived for 300 years and had seen his people thrive in peace. He believed that kindness was the strongest force in the universe. He was wrong about many things, but he was not wrong about that. The Krethax Empire found the HFY during a routine scan of the sector. The Krethax were everything the Valari were not. They were large, violent, and hungry for power. Their bodies were covered in thick gray armor that grew from their own skin. Their eyes were red and filled with cruelty. They had conquered 47 worlds and enslaved billions of beings. To them, the weak existed only to serve the strong. When the Krethax scanners detected rich mineral deposits beneath the surface of the HFY, the Empire made its decision quickly. The minerals were valuable. The Valari were not. The moon would be stripped of its resources, and the native species would be eliminated or enslaved. This was how the Krethax operated. This was how they had always operated. 12 warships entered orbit above the peaceful moon. Each ship was massive, bristling with weapons that could level entire cities in seconds. The Valari had never seen such machines. They did not understand what they were looking at. Some of them thought the ships might be visitors who came in peace. HFY knew better. He had studied the histories of the galaxy. He knew about the Krethax and their endless hunger for conquest. When he saw those 12 ships hanging in the sky like dark omens, his old heart filled with a fear he had never known. He called an emergency meeting of the Valari Council. The council chamber was a simple room filled with flowering vines and soft light. The elders gathered, their faces showing confusion and worry. They asked HFY what these strangers wanted. He told them the truth. The strangers wanted their world, and they would kill anyone who stood in their way. The council fell silent. One elder asked if they could fight. HFY shook his head. They had no weapons, no soldiers, and no ships. Another elder asked if they could hide. HFY explained that there was nowhere to hide from orbital bombardment. A third elder asked if they could run. HFY said that they had no means to leave their world. Then a young council member named Sarah spoke up. She asked if they could call for help. The galaxy was vast, and there were many powerful species out there. Surely someone would come to save them. HFY considered this idea. The Valari had a single communication array that could send messages across great distances. They had built it long ago to listen to the music of the stars. Perhaps it could be used to cry out for help. He composed a message that night. He spoke in his gentle voice, describing his people and their peaceful ways. He explained that they had never harmed anyone and only wanted to live in peace. He begged anyone who could hear him to come and save them from the Krethax fleet. He transmitted this message to every known frequency, hoping it would reach someone who cared. The message traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light. It reached the great powers of the Galactic Concord within hours. 17 spacefaring civilizations received the plea. Council chambers on 100 worlds played the recording of the old Valari elder, begging for his people's lives. The Draven Collective was the first to respond. They were an ancient species of traders who valued profit above all else. Their council debated for exactly 12 minutes before deciding that helping the Valari would damage their trade agreements with the Krethax Empire. The Valari had nothing to offer in return for assistance. The decision was simple. They would not help. The Centauri Federation received the message next. They were a proud warrior species who had built a mighty alliance of dozens of worlds. Their military could have crushed the Krethax fleet easily, but the Valari were not members of their alliance. They had signed no treaties and paid no dues. The Federation Council voted to ignore the plea. It was not their problem. The Morthani Empire listened to the message with something like amusement. The Morthani believed in strength above all else. To them, the Valari were pathetic creatures who deserved whatever fate awaited them. The universe was cruel, and the weak did not survive. This was simply the natural order of things. One by one, every major power in the galaxy made the same choice. They looked at the Valari and saw no value, no benefit, and no reason to risk their own ships and soldiers. The plea went unanswered. The galaxy remained silent. Far away, near the edge of explored space, a small human ship called the Starbound was conducting a survey of an uncharted nebula. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. They were considered young, primitive, and unimportant by galactic standards. They had no seat on the Concorde, no powerful allies, and no reputation worth mentioning. Captain Daniel Mercer was reviewing sensor data when his communications officer picked up an unusual signal. It was the Valari transmission, still echoing across the void. Daniel told his officer to play it on the main speakers. The bridge crew listened in silence as Ariva's voice filled the room. They heard the fear in his words. They heard the desperation. They heard an old man begging someone, anyone, to save his people from extinction. When the message ended, no one spoke for a long moment. First Officer Katie Lawson was the first to break the silence. She asked Daniel what they should do. Daniel looked at the star chart on his screen. The Zara 4 was 3 days away at maximum speed. The Starbound was not a warship. It was a small exploration vessel with no real weapons and no military training. Going to help the Valari would be suicide. He thought about the old Valari's voice. He thought about the children playing in those glowing gardens. He thought about what kind of people humans wanted to be in this vast and uncaring galaxy. Daniel made his choice. He ordered the helmsman to set a course for the Zara 4 at maximum speed. When Katie asked him if he was sure, he told her that he had never been more sure of anything in his life. Someone had to help those people. If the whole galaxy refused to act, then one human ship would have to be enough. The Starbound jumped to hyperspace, carrying 62 humans toward a battle they could not win. None of them knew if they would survive. All of them knew they were doing the right thing. The journey to the Zara 4 took 3 days. During that time, Captain Daniel Mercer gathered his crew in the main cargo bay and told them the truth. He explained that they were flying toward a fleet of Krethax warships. He told them that the Starbound had no real weapons, no armor, and no military backup. He made it clear that this mission would likely end in death for all of them. Then he asked if anyone wanted to stay behind. He said that the ship would pass near a small human colony on the way. Anyone who did not want to fight could leave there with no shame and no judgment. This was not their battle. They had no obligation to die for strangers. Not a single person raised their hand. Every crew member chose to continue. Some of them were scared. Some of them were uncertain. But all of them understood that they could not turn away from innocent people who needed help. Chief Engineer Marcus Cole was a practical man who had spent 20 years keeping ships running in deep space. He looked at the Starbound's equipment and saw possibilities where others saw junk. The ship carried mining lasers for cutting through asteroids. Marcus began working to modify these lasers into weapons. They would not be powerful, but they would be something. Security Chief Nicole Grant had served in the Earth Defense Force before joining the exploration program. She knew how to fight, and she knew how to train others. She gathered every crew member who volunteered for combat duty and began teaching them basic tactics. They practiced in the corridors, learning how to move as a team and how to handle the few sidearms the ship carried. Dr. Lucas Webb prepared the medical bay for mass casualties. He organized supplies, trained volunteers as field medics, and tried not to think about how many of his friends he might lose in the coming battle. He was a healer, not a soldier, but he understood that his skills would be needed more than ever. On the bridge, Katie Lawson studied everything she could find about the Krethax. She learned about their tactics, their weaknesses, and their habits. The Krethax were arrogant. They had won so many battles that they have grown careless. They did not expect serious resistance from anyone, especially not from a small exploration ship crewed by a young species. They had never heard of. Daniel spent his time recording messages. He sent one to Earth Command explaining what they were doing and why. He sent another to his mother, telling her that he loved her and that he was proud to be her son. He sent a third to the Galactic Concord, informing them that humanity was taking action, even if no one else would. When the Starbound dropped out of hyperspace above the SAR 4, the crew saw the Krethax fleet waiting in orbit. 12 massive warships hung in the darkness like metal mountains. Each one was at least 10 times larger than the Starbound. Their weapons ports glowed with barely contained energy, ready to unleash devastation on the peaceful moon below. For a moment, everyone on the bridge felt the weight of what they were facing. Kitty looked at the sensor readings and quietly reported that any one of those ships could destroy them in seconds. Daniel nodded. He had known this from the beginning. The Krethax detected the Starbound almost immediately. A communication channel opened, and the face of Commander Varath appeared on the main view screen. Varath was a senior Krethax warlord who had personally overseen the conquest of 9 worlds. He was large even by Krethax standards, his gray armor body covered in scars from countless battles. His red eyes studied the human ship with something like amusement. Varath asked who they were and what they wanted. His voice was deep and filled with contempt. He said they looked like insects flying into a furnace. Daniel stood straight and spoke clearly. He identified himself as the captain of the Starbound, representing humanity. He declared that the Valari were now under human protection. Any attack on them would be considered an act of war against the human species. Varath laughed. The sound was harsh and ugly. He asked Daniel if this was a joke. He pointed out that humanity was nothing, a minor species that had barely left their home system. He said the Krethax had crushed civilizations 1,000 times more powerful than humanity. What did one small ship think it could accomplish? Daniel did not argue. He simply ordered the helmsman to move the Starbound directly between the Krethax fleet and the planet. The ship positioned itself in the path of any bombardment, serving as a living shield for the world below. Varath stopped laughing. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human captain. He demanded to know if Daniel was insane. He said that moving would not save the humans. It would only mean they died first. Daniel told Varath that he understood this perfectly. He said that the Starbound would not move. If the Krethax wanted to bomb the Valari, they would have to go through the humans first. The standoff began. For 6 long hours, neither side moved. The Krethax ships held their positions, their weapons charged and ready. The Starbound hung in space, small and fragile but refusing to yield. During those hours, Katie worked on a desperate plan. She contacted the Valari on the surface and began coordinating an evacuation. The Valari had underground caves and shelters that might survive orbital bombardment. If they could move enough people underground, some might live even if the worst happened. Arivith received the human transmission with disbelief. He had given up hope when the galaxy ignored his plea. Now a species he had never met was risking everything to save his people. He asked Katie why the humans were doing this. Katie thought about the question for a moment. She told Arivith that she did not have a good answer. She said that humans had done many terrible things throughout their history. They had fought wars, hurt each other, and made countless mistakes. But somewhere deep inside, most humans believed that you did not abandon people who needed help. It was not complicated. It was simply the right thing to do. Arivith began organizing the evacuation immediately. Balari families gathered their children and moved toward the underground shelters. The young helped the old. The strong helped the weak. For the first time in their history, the Valari moved with urgency and purpose. On the Krethax flagship, Vareth grew increasingly frustrated. He was not used to being defied. He was not used to enemies who refused to flee or surrender. The human ship was tiny and defenseless, yet it sat there in his path like an immovable stone. His subordinates urged him to simply destroy the human vessel and proceed with the bombardment. The mission was behind schedule. The Empire expected results. But something about the situation bothered Voreth. He had conquered many worlds, and he had seen many enemies. None of them had ever acted like this. He opened the communication channel again and spoke to Daniel directly. He asked the human captain one final time to move his ship. He said there was no logical reason to die for strangers. He offered to let the Starbound leave safely if they withdrew now. Daniel shook his head. He told Voreth that logic had nothing to do with it. He said that sometimes you had to stand up for what was right, even when it cost you everything. He said that was what made humans human. Voreth ended the communication. He had given the humans their chance. Now he would destroy them. He gave the order to fire. The first volley from the Krethax fleet lit up the darkness of space. 12 ships unleashed their weapons at once, sending a storm of energy toward the single human vessel that dared to stand in their way. On the Starbound, alarms screamed as the crew braced for impact. Daniel gripped the arms of his chair and whispered a quiet prayer. Katie reached out and took his hand. Marcus stood ready at the engineering console, prepared to do whatever it took to keep them alive for just a few more minutes. The universe held its breath as fire rushed toward the tiny ship that had chosen to stand alone. The first volley hit the Starbound with devastating force. The ship's shields, designed to deflect small space debris, collapsed instantly. Explosions ripped through the lower decks. Metal screamed and twisted. Fire erupted in corridors where crew members had been working moments before. 14 people died in that first attack. They were engineers, scientists, and technicians who had volunteered to stand against an empire. Their names would later be carved into monuments across 100 worlds. But in that moment, they were simply gone. Daniel pulled himself up from the floor where the impact had thrown him. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. The bridge was filled with smoke and flashing warning lights. He called out for damage reports, and the answers that came back were terrible. The lower decks were gone. Life support was failing in multiple sections. The main engines were damaged, but still functional. The shields would not come back online. They had survived the first volley only because the Krethax had not expected them to still be there at all. Katie shouted that more fire was incoming. Daniel ordered evasive maneuvers, knowing they could not dodge forever. The Starbound lurched sideways as the helmsman threw them into a desperate spiral. Energy beams passed close enough to scorch the hull. Marcus Cole's voice came over the intercom from engineering. He reported that he had managed to bring the mining lasers online. They were not powerful weapons, but they could at least shoot back. Daniel told him to fire at will. The modified mining lasers lanced out toward the nearest Krethax patrol vessel. The beams were weak compared to military weapons, but they found gaps in the enemy armor. Small explosions erupted along the patrol ship's hull. It was not enough to destroy the vessel, but it was enough to hurt it. Vareth watched from his flagship with growing disbelief. The human ship was burning, crippled, and outnumbered 12-1. By every measure of warfare, it should have been destroyed in the first seconds of combat. Instead, it was still fighting. It was still shooting back. It was refusing to die. He ordered his ships to concentrate their fire. He wanted the humans eliminated immediately. This had gone on long enough. The next several minutes were pure chaos. The Starbound twisted and rolled through a storm of weapons fire, somehow staying alive through a combination of skill, luck, and sheer determination. Nicole Grant led damage control teams through burning corridors, sealing breaches and rescuing wounded crew members. Dr. Lucas Webb worked frantically in the medical bay, treating injuries faster than he had ever worked in his life. Daniel made a decision. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. He ordered the Starbound to charge directly at the nearest Krethax cruiser. The crew did not hesitate. They followed the order without question. The cruiser's crew never expected a crippled exploration vessel to attack them head-on. By the time they realized what was happening, the Starbound had closed to point-blank range. Marcus fired everything they had directly into the cruiser's engine section. The enemy ship's reactor destabilized and exploded, taking the cruiser with it. 1 Krethax ship down. 11 remained. The explosion from the cruiser damaged another patrol vessel, leaving it drifting and helpless. That made 2 ships out of the fight. But the cost had been terrible. The Starbound was barely holding together. More crew members had died. The ship was running out of power, out of ammunition, and out of time. Nicole Grant came to Daniel with a desperate idea. She had been studying the Krethax patrol vessels during the battle. Their security was weak because the Krethax never expected anyone to board them. If she could take a small team and capture one of those ships, they could turn its weapons against the rest of the fleet. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He knew what she was asking. She was asking for permission to lead a suicide mission. The chances of success were almost zero. But almost zero was still better than nothing. He gave her permission. He told her to pick her team, and go. Nicole gathered 8 volunteers. They suited up in emergency spacesuits and made their way to the Starbound's remaining shuttle. The shuttle was damaged, barely functional, but Nicole believed she could make it work. She told her team that they were probably not coming back. They nodded and followed her anyway. The shuttle launched from the burning Starbound and raced toward the nearest Krethax patrol vessel. The enemy did not notice them at first because they were too focused on destroying the human ship. By the time they realized the shuttle was approaching, Nicole and her team had already breached the hull. What followed was brutal. Close-quarters combat through the cramped corridors of the Krethax vessel. Nicole's team was outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a ferocity that shocked the Krethax soldiers. 3 humans died in the first minute of fighting. 2 more fell as they pushed toward the bridge. But the survivors kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to give up. Nicole reached the bridge with only 2 team members still standing beside her. The Krethax captain turned to face her, his red eyes filled with rage. He was twice her size and covered in natural armor. He charged at her with clawed hands extended. She shot him 3 times in the face before he reached her. He fell at her feet, and she stepped over his body to reach the weapons console. She did not know how to read Krethax controls, but she had studied their ship designs during the journey. She found the weapon systems and figured out how to aim them. Then she opened fire on the nearest Krethax warship. The enemy vessel's shields were not prepared for an attack from their own side. Nicole's captured weapons tore through the unprepared ship, causing massive damage before the other Krethax commanders understood what was happening. Back on the Starbound, Marcus Cole watched the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet. He saw an opportunity. He told Daniel that if he overloaded the reactor core in a controlled burst, he could create an electromagnetic pulse that would disable another enemy ship. The catch was that it would also destroy most of their remaining systems. Daniel asked Marcus if they could survive it. Marcus said probably not, but it would take another enemy ship with them. Daniel told him to do it. The pulse erupted from the Starbound like a wave of lightning. It crashed into the nearest Krethax destroyer, frying its systems and leaving it dead in space. But the pulse also killed what remained of the Starbound's power. The ship went dark and began to drift. Daniel ordered everyone to the escape pods. The ship was finished. They had done everything they could. Now they needed to reach the planet's surface and continue the fight from there. The surviving crew members made their way through dark corridors to the escape pods. Many were wounded. Some had to be carried. But they moved as fast as they could, helping each other through the dying ship. As the escape pods launched toward the SAR-4, something unexpected happened. New ships began appearing at the edge of the system. First one, then 3, then a dozen. They were not Krethax ships. They belonged to species that had ignored the Valari's plea. The battle for the SAR-4 had been broadcast on open channels from the moment the Starbound arrived. Every species in the Galactic Concord had watched the fight. They had seen one human ship stand against 12 Krethax warships. They had seen humans die protecting strangers. They had seen courage that shamed them all. Now they were coming. The Dravens sent 3 warships. The Centauri sent an entire battle group. Even the Morthani sent observers, calling this the most honorable display of warfare they had ever witnessed. Varth found himself suddenly facing a coalition fleet that outnumbered his surviving ships 10-1. The hunters had become the hunted. As her escape pod descended through the atmosphere of the SAR-4. Katie looked up through the small window at the lights of battle far above. She was exhausted, wounded, and uncertain if she would survive the landing. But for the first time since this had begun, she allowed herself to hope. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. The galaxy had finally awakened. The coalition fleet made quick work of the remaining Krethax ships. Vorath, the proud warlord who had conquered 9 worlds, tried to retreat when he saw the enemy numbers. He was not fast enough. Centauri warships cut off his escape route while Draven vessels pounded his flagship with concentrated fire. Vorath died when his ship exploded. He never understood what had happened. He never understood why a young species with no power had been willing to sacrifice everything for strangers. It was beyond his comprehension, and he went to his death confused and angry. On the surface of the SAR-4, the Valari emerged from their underground shelters to find human survivors scattered across their world. Katie Lawson had landed near the capital city with 5 other crew members. Her escape pod had crashed hard, and she had broken her arm in the impact. But she was alive, and that was more than she had expected. Valari healers rushed to help the wounded humans. They had never treated beings so different from themselves, but they did their best. Their medicine was designed for Valari biology, but their kindness needed no translation. They brought food, water, and comfort to the strange creatures who had saved them. Daniel, Mercer's escape pod landed several miles from the main group. He had suffered serious injuries during the battle, and the rough landing had made them worse. When Valari rescue teams found him, he was barely conscious. They carried him gently to their medical facility and worked through the night to save his life. Arivith came to see Daniel as soon as he heard where the human captain was being treated. The old Valari sat beside Daniel's bed and watched him sleep. He thought about the message he had sent into the void, expecting nothing. He thought about the galaxy that had ignored him. And he thought about this one species that had come when no one else would. When Daniel finally woke, Arivith was still there. The human captain looked at the elderly Valari with tired eyes and asked if his people were safe. Arivith told him that they were. Thanks to the humans, millions of Valari had survived. The Krethax fleet was destroyed. The galaxy itself had come to their defense. All because one small ship had refused to look away. Daniel smiled weakly and said that was good. Then he closed his eyes and slept again. He would need many weeks to recover from his injuries, but he would survive. The news of the Battle of the Sara IV spread across the galaxy faster than any story in living memory. Every species had seen the footage. They had watched the burning Starbound hold position while Krethax weapons tore it apart. They had seen the escape pods falling toward the planet like seeds of hope. They had witnessed humans dying for people they had never met. The reaction was overwhelming. On Draven worlds, ordinary citizens demanded to know why their government had refused to help. On Synthary planets, military officers questioned the honor of an alliance that abandoned the helpless. Even among the Morthani, known for their worship of strength, there was a growing sense that true strength meant more than simple violence. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session to discuss what had happened. Representatives from every major civilization gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral station called Junction. They had come to debate, to argue, and to decide what lessons should be learned from the Sara IV. Daniel Mercer was invited to address the assembly. He was still recovering from his injuries and had to be helped to the speaking platform by Katie and Marcus. The Great Hall fell silent as the human captain looked out at the faces of 100 different species. Thought many expected him to demand recognition for humanity. Others thought he would ask for territory, resources, or political power. Some believed he would condemn the species that had abandoned the Valari. Daniel did none of these things. Instead, he spoke simply and quietly. He said that humanity had not come to the Sara IV for glory or reward. They had come because innocent people were going to die, and no one was willing to help. He said that the galaxy was vast and often cruel, but cruelty was not inevitable. Every species had a choice in how they treated the weak and the helpless. Then he made a single request. He asked the Concord to establish a formal protocol for protecting defenseless species across the galaxy. He proposed a permanent coalition force that would respond to distress calls from any world, regardless of their political importance or economic value. He said that no one should have to beg the universe for help only to receive silence. The proposal sparked intense debate. Many argued that such intervention would be too expensive. Others claimed it would lead to endless conflicts. Some insisted that the natural order of the universe was for the strong to dominate the weak, and any attempt to change this was foolish. But the image of the burning Starbound had changed something in the hearts of many delegates. They had seen what courage looked like. They had seen what compassion could accomplish, and they felt ashamed of their own inaction. The vote was closer than Daniel had hoped, but the proposal passed. The Galactic Defense Protocol became law. For the first time in history, the major powers of the galaxy committed to protecting those who could not protect themselves. Katie Lawson returned to Earth as a hero, but she found the attention difficult to accept. Reporters wanted to interview her about human bravery. Politicians wanted to give her medals. Crowds gathered wherever she went to cheer and celebrate. She refused most of the honors. When asked why, she explained that she had not fought for recognition. She had fought because she could not stand by and watch innocent people die. The true heroes, she said, were the 23 crew members who had not survived. They deserved to be remembered, not her. Instead of accepting fame, Katie spent her time speaking about the Valari themselves. She talked about their beautiful gardens and their peaceful songs. She described their belief that all life was sacred. She helped people understand that the Valari were not just statistics or distant strangers. They were real beings with families, hopes, and dreams. Marcus Cole received offers from the finest shipyards in the galaxy. His improvised modifications to the Starbound had impressed engineers across multiple species. They wanted to learn how he had turned mining lasers into weapons and how he had kept a dying ship fighting for so long. He turned down every offer. Instead, he asked to be assigned to the SAR-4. The Valari needed help rebuilding the settlements that had been damaged during the bombardment. They needed engineers who understood construction and repair. Marcus decided that he would rather build than destroy. On the SAR-4, the Valari composed a new song unlike any they had created before. They called it the Song of the Impossible Light. It was named for the burning trail of the Starbound as it fell through their atmosphere, a streak of fire that had brought hope instead of destruction. The song began with soft, sorrowful notes that captured the fear and desperation of the Valari when the Krethax arrived. Then the melody changed, growing stronger and more hopeful as it described the arrival of the human ship. The final movement was a celebration of life, unity, and the unexpected kindness of strangers. Ariveth led a formal ceremony in the capital city to honor the humans who had saved his people. He announced that all surviving crew members of the Starbound were being adopted as members of the Valari people. This honor had never been extended to outsiders in the entire history of their civilization. The humans who attended the ceremony were moved beyond words. They had come to the SAR-4 expecting to die. Instead, they had found a new family among the stars. Daniel stood on a balcony, overlooking the glowing gardens of the Valari capital as the ceremony concluded. His injuries still pained him, and he knew he would never fully recover from everything he had been through. But as he listened to the song of the impossible light rising into the night sky, he felt at peace. They had done something that mattered. They had changed the galaxy, and nothing could ever take that away. 20 years passed after the Battle of the SAR-4. The galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Galactic Defense Protocol that Daniel Mercer had proposed became the foundation of interstellar law. A permanent coalition fleet patrolled the stars, responding to distress calls from defenseless worlds wherever they arose. Humanity earned a reputation that had nothing to do with military power or technological advancement. Other species had better ships. Other species had stronger weapons. But when people across the galaxy thought of humans, they thought of the Starbound. They thought of 62 beings who had chosen to die for strangers. They had never met. The coalition fleet attracted volunteers from every member species of the Concord. Young idealists from 100 worlds signed up to serve, inspired by the example the humans had set. They came from peaceful species and warrior cultures alike. They came because they believed that protecting the helpless was worth any sacrifice. Humans were always overrepresented among these volunteers. Something about their species seemed drawn to this kind of service. When asked why, many of them struggled to explain. They would talk about the Starbound, about Daniel Mercer, about the burning ship that refused to retreat. They would say that this was what humanity should be. This was the kind of legacy they wanted to leave behind. Nicole Grant, who had captured the Krethax patrol vessel during the battle, became the first human to command a coalition task force. She spent 15 years leading rescue missions across the galaxy. She saved countless lives and trained a new generation of officers in the tactics she had learned the hard way. When she finally retired, she settled on the SAR-4 and spent her remaining years helping Valari children learn about the strange beings from Earth who had become their friends. Dr. Lucas Webb wrote a comprehensive medical text about treating multiple species in combat conditions. His experience aboard the Starbound had taught him things that no other human doctor knew. The book became required reading in medical schools across the galaxy. It saved more lives than he could ever count, and he considered that his true contribution to the universe. Katie Lawson, Eventually accepted a position teaching at the newly established Galactic Academy of Diplomacy. She taught young beings from dozens of species about conflict resolution, interspecies communication, and the importance of compassion in politics. Her students went on to become ambassadors, negotiators, and peacemakers throughout the galaxy. She never forgot the Valari, and she returned to the HFY every year to participate in the anniversary celebration of their rescue. Marcus Cole spent 12 years on the HFY, helping the Valari rebuild and expand their civilization. He taught them basic engineering principles, and they taught him about the music of the stars. When he finally returned to Earth, he carried with him seeds from the famous glowing gardens. He planted them outside his home and spent his evenings sitting among the gentle light, remembering friends who had not survived. That the wreckage of the original Starbound was recovered from orbit and transformed into a memorial station. It hung in space above the HFY, a twisted monument to the price of courage. Inside, visitors could walk through preserved sections of the ship and see the damage from Krethak's weapons. They could read the names of the 23 crew members who had died during the battle. They could listen to recordings of their final transmissions. Many of those recordings were simple messages to loved ones back home. Some were prayers. Others were expressions of fear that somehow transformed into determination. One young engineer named Carlos Vega had recorded himself saying that he was scared, but that he knew they were doing the right thing. His recording was played millions of times across the galaxy and inspired generations of young people to serve others. On the anniversary of the battle, species from across the galaxy gather on the HFY to participate in the Song of the Impossible Light. The ceremony had grown over the years. The original Valari melody now incorporated musical elements from 100 different cultures. Draven added their deep rhythmic drums. Synthri contributed their sharp, precise harmonies. Even the Morthani contributed a section, a powerful march that honored the warriors who had fallen, but the core melody remained the same. It began with fear and ended with hope. It told the story of a plea that went unanswered until one unlikely species chose to respond. Daniel Mercer attended the anniversary ceremony every year until his health no longer permitted travel. He never sought fame or recognition for what he had done. When journalists asked him about the battle, he always redirected the conversation to his crew members. He spoke about their bravery, their sacrifice, and their belief that every life mattered. Eventually, Daniel retired to a small colony near the edge of explored space. He had been offered positions of power and influence countless times, but he had turned them all down. He wanted a simple life, far from politics and ceremonies. He wanted time to think and remember. He spent his final years teaching young cadets at a small training facility. He told them stories about the Starbound and the people who had served aboard her. He explained that being a good person was not about grand gestures or historic battles. It was about the small choices made every day. It was about choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. It was about standing up for others, even when no one would notice or reward you. When asked about his greatest accomplishment, Daniel never mentioned the battle or the Galactic Defense Protocol. Instead, he talked about the Valari children he had met on the HFY in the weeks after the rescue. He described their large dark eyes and their soft blue skin. He talked about how they had been so curious about the strange creatures from Earth who had come to save them. One little girl named Sari had asked Daniel why the humans had come to help when everyone else had refused. He had knelt down to her level and tried to explain. He told her that humans believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. He said that it did not matter if the Valari were strangers or if saving them was difficult. What mattered was that they needed help, and the humans could provide it. Sari had thought about this for a moment. Then she had hugged Daniel and said that she wanted to be like the humans when she grew up. She wanted to help people who needed it, no matter how hard it might be. That memory stayed with Daniel for the rest of his life. It reminded him why they had fought and what they had been fighting for. Not for glory or recognition, but for the chance to make the universe a little bit kinder than they had found it. Daniel died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87. His funeral was attended by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The Valari sent a choir to sing a special version of the Song of the Impossible Light, modified to honor the human captain who had given them hope. A simple monument was erected on the HFY, near the spot where Daniel's escape pod had crashed. It bore words in both Valari script and English. The inscription read, "When the galaxy looked away, humanity looked closer. When others saw weakness, they saw family. They came not for glory, not for gain, but because they believed that no voice crying for help should go unanswered." This is the human way. The stars continued to burn in the endless darkness of space. Empires rose and fell as they always had. The universe remained vast and often indifferent to the small beings who traveled through it. But somewhere in that darkness, there were always ships flying toward distant cries for help. They were crewed by beings of every species, who had learned that the true measure of a civilization was not how it treated the powerful, but how it treated the defenseless. And that lesson had begun with one ship, one crew, and one impossible choice. A young species called humanity had looked into the void and decided that silence was not an acceptable answer. They had taught the galaxy that courage and compassion were worth more than strength and conquest. That lesson would echo through the ages, inspiring countless acts of kindness and bravery. It would survive the rise and fall of great powers. It would outlast the memories of emperors and warlords whose names faded into nothing. The memory of the Starbound would never die. And as long as that memory lived, there would always be someone willing to stand for those who could not stand for themselves. This was the legacy of humanity. This was the gift they gave to the stars. And it all started because one captain refused to look away.